Good deal. And so, yeah, we got a big day tomorrow, huh? Be nice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yep.
Yep. Yep. Yep. I'm good. All right, there we go. Always get that last whack. Let's do it. What's up, Dolphins fans? We're a little more than a week away from the draft, and the Dolphins have filled most of their needs. The question now is, which direction do they go in the draft with their day 2 selections in the second and third rounds? I'm Chris Perkins, your Dolphins columnist from the Sun Sentinel. That's David Furones, your Dolphins beat writer from the Sun Sentinel. We both did mock drafts in the last week or so. We're going to talk about those today. And we'll talk about the possibility of the Dolphins, who we think are in a 2-year win-now window, of them trading back into the first round. And if they were to do so, what would they be seeking? Along with that, you guys know the Dolphins have a good history with their second-round pick. So we're going to briefly recount that history and talk about the significance if it carries over into this year. Could they get an instant impact starter in the second round? And if so, at what position? Left guard, right tackle, tight end, running back? Dolphins have also signed wide receiver Chosen Anderson, our local kid from South Plantation High School. I don't know if you can call him a kid. I think he's an 8-year vet. But on Twitter, I almost called him a reclamation project. I decided against it. But here's the question, though. Can Dolphins culture under Mike McDaniel and Tua and Teron Armstead, Wes Welker, everybody else, take a guy who has been recently troubled and keep him focused? We're going to talk about that. In recent years, the Dolphins have tried to kind of bring back some of these first-round picks, guys like Taco Charlton, Robert Kimdichie, but this is a new thing with McDaniel, the guy who has been troubled off field. And then finally, look, this is just as an addition, but you guys know, you've seen the quarterback salaries, right? Jalen Hurts from Philadelphia getting 5 years, $255 million, $179 million guaranteed. This is why the Dolphins are in this win-now window, this 2-year window. Tua is going to be expensive after that 5th-year option, right? He's getting $24 million in 2024. After that, it's going to be really, really tough to add quality players to get you to the point where you want to go. So the 2-year win-now window, baby, it is open. A lot to digest there. Let's dive in. All right, Furones, so we're going to talk here about whether the Dolphins are going to fill a need in the second round or draft the best player available. And I've always been a fill a need guy. I know there's a lot of executives who say you get in trouble when you fill needs, you draft the best player available, the so-called BPA. Your mock draft actually like better than mine as far as who you had the Dolphins taking. You had them taking Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs at number 51. I had them taking Iowa tight end Sam Laporta. I like your pick better. It fills a need. I think they need to improve the run game. Some people believe in drafting best player available. Here's what I think, Furones, and you tell me if you agree with this. I think if the Dolphins take, say, a wide receiver in the second round, say a guy like John Flowers from North Carolina is their highest rated player on the draft board. So if they draft him, that's drafting best player available. You don't really need a receiver. Now, if Jahmyr Gibbs is there and the Dolphins take him, that's a combination of filling a need and getting best player available. But if you get maybe a right tackle, a left guard, and there's a player on your board who's higher rated, you're filling a need because you need a right tackle or a left guard. So let me ask you, Furones, why did you say Jahmyr Gibbs, and do you think Dolphins go best player available, or do you think they fill a need in the second round with their first pick of the draft?
Okay, wait. So you like my pick better? The whole time I loved your mock draft. I thought it was more realistic. I didn't go in thinking Jahmyr Gibbs would even be available, but I remember last week I was on the show and I said I liked yours better, but I just had to be different.
Right.
So I was. And I went into the mock draft thinking, okay, I'm definitely drafting either a tight end or an offensive lineman by the time 51 comes around. And yeah, didn't believe Gibbs would be available by then. I thought for sure I'd have taken him before then, but I took every team's pick really honestly, putting myself in their shoes and thinking what I believed was best for that organization. And in the several picks leading up to Miami at 51, I genuinely felt there was a good option at a position that those teams could probably use a little bit more, with the idea of the way running backs are valued or devalued these days. And kind of just that's how the mock draft sort of played out for me. Now, maybe someone does try to trade up into one of those spots if they see that Jahmyr Gibbs is going into those 40s and they kind of target the Dolphins as where he would last the longest. And maybe a team tries to jump in front of them. But, I mean, Chris Greer has a history of not taking running backs early in the drafts. Mike McDaniel, throughout his time as run game coordinator and offensive coordinator in San Francisco, has proven he can produce a solid run game without a top-tier bell cow running back, although even them, the 49ers, they did go with Christian McCaffrey at the trade deadline last year. And hey, I've led the charge in saying I like the Mostert-Wilson combination as a value proposition due to their familiarity with McDaniel and his system and financially how cheap they are. But I got to that pick and said, if Gibbs is still there, do the Dolphins really pass up on him? If you insert him, his explosiveness into this offense as a healthy 21-year-old, when McDaniel admitted recently he didn't run the ball as much last year because his backs were dealing with some injuries. So you get a young, healthy 21-year-old back that can just get thrown right in there, then this offense could be unstoppable, and it could be the draft pick that puts the Dolphins over the top in terms of a deep playoff run. So I definitely want a tight end drafted, but it is a deep class at that position, so maybe one can be found later on, even though I do love Sam Laporta. If Gibbs isn't available and the rest of the draft plays out the way I have it with those tight ends drafted ahead, Darnell Washington, et cetera, obviously the first rounders like Dalton Kincaid and whatnot, then sure, I would love Laporta at that slot, but whether that or an offensive lineman, you do have some holes to fill. Maybe you could do that, a right tackle with a veteran signing later. Blake Freeland could be a scheme fit and test it out of his mind, but maybe round two is, well, definitely too early for him based on what he showed on film. So, yeah, I just really like the pick. If Gibbs is there, then you have to if you're the Dolphins. On the best player available debate, I think when you're in a rebuild mode and you have a number of holes to fill, like the Dolphins were in several of the previous classes, then you certainly draft best player available and try to construct the overall roster as best you can. Once you're past the rebuild part of it and you're in a playoff contention, championship contention phase, you have to just draft by immediate need, I feel, with an eye for the future as well with those selections. But you're giving yourself a title-winning window, and you need to eliminate as many deficiencies as possible. So once you just have those fewer holes, then, yeah, I do feel you need to draft by need specifically, and you need to hit on those early picks to just eliminate whatever holes you have on the roster to build that ultimate team roster that will contend.
Furones, what do you think is the biggest need on the roster right now? Because look, the Dolphins really have filled all of there's no glaring holes right now. Even at tight end, you've got Durham Smythe and you've got Eric Saubert. At right tackle, you've got Austin Jackson. Kendall Lamb is there. We'll see what happens with Brandon Shell. Left guard, you've got Liam Eichenberg. You've got Robert Jones. None of those guys I just named are like Pro Bowl candidates, like you would say, Javon Holland or Christian Wilkins but the guys that I just named, they're adequate players. And when you look at what's around them, right, you've got Teron Armstead and Connor Williams on that offensive line. And you do have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle at the receiver position. You've got a strong defense you don't look at the team as one place. You kind of look at them as an overall. You can't have a Pro Bowl player at every single roster spot and a great draft pick who's in the waiting as your backup. There are some times you just have to make do. So I would say that maybe the most glaring need, well, I would. This is going to sound ridiculous. I would say right now it might be backup left tackle. I really do. I mean, I want to see you upgrade at running back, but that's not your most glaring need. The right tackle you can do, the left guard you can do, the tight end you can do. Teron Armstead has missed so many games. I think it's an average of 5.5 per season the last 6 years, and he's such a good player that if you don't have a good plan for his absence, I think you're in a lot of trouble. As ridiculous as it sounds, backup left tackle might be your most glaring need right now. Shoot me down, Furones. Make me sound like an idiot. Do it.
Hey, we all know you're not afraid to sound ridiculous.
Right?
Yeah, rarely do you think of a team's most glaring need as a backup at a certain position. But I mean, I get your point. I think right tackle is a little bit more of a point of emphasis. Of course, obviously Tua Tagovailoa's blindside, so you need to be sure on that side. And Austin Jackson, while I know Mike McDaniel wants to give him the second year in the system, he believes that's very critical for any offensive lineman. Really, Austin Jackson barely even had a first year in the system. I mean, sure, he's learning the system, but he went on injured reserve in each of the 2 games that he started last season. So very minimal playing time. The organization is still hopeful that they can get the most out of him. Same with Liam Eichenberg at left guard and giving them a chance, but having some options behind them, especially with Eichenberg now. Dan Feeney could slide into left guard as he came in as a free agent acquisition. Robert Jones is always there. Even if you go down to Lester Cotton, who started a playoff game just this past January. So tight end is up there, a pass-catching tight end, because right now they have mostly blockers at tight end. Tanner Connor's sort of a project, undrafted guy as the third one that didn't play much last year, but he could become a pass-catching tight end if they develop him that way. So that's why, hey, the Dolphins, sure, they're drafting a little bit out of luxury here to just find where they could add something as opposed to really addressing something that is a glaring weakness, because they don't really have too many of those. Really, I mean, you could say any of those, especially if you're reaching to back up left tackle as your most glaring need.
I love it. A reach, baby. I love it.
It's draft time. We got to talk about reaches.
That's right. Exactly. Hey, and let's also mention this, Furones, that when we talk about the draft, there's also the Dolphins getting the post-June 1st money, right, from Byron Jones there, and then you're going to have a class of free agents out there after the draft, veteran free agents. Maybe that's how you get your running back. Maybe that's how you get one of these other guys. So let's not forget that there's life after the draft when you're talking about player acquisition. So, and
the other thing with a running back pick is, well, the Dalvin Cook sweepstakes that's out there. We know his situation in Minnesota, whether or not he remains there. So the Dolphins, they could insert them. So we kind of have an idea that they were talking to the Vikings earlier in the offseason. But now if you do draft a running back, then you kind of take yourself out of that as well. So do the Dolphins go in with a mindset of that, like, hey, you still have Dalvin Cook dangling around there? Do they kind of wait till the season to maybe look into that? That's another factor there, is if they have that in the back of their minds.
Right. That just gives you more options for the draft, a little more leeway. Right. If you're thinking some veterans could be cut, during training camp or, post-draft, see what's there. So, yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that. Furones, let's move into the next segment. And I think this one is going to be pretty quick, right? And we're going to talk about should the Dolphins trade back into the first round. We know they don't have assets, right? They've got a second and a third this year. If they want to start going into next year, if I'm a team, I don't know if I'm going for that. I want my picks right now this year if I'm giving up a first-round pick. If the Dolphins do decide they need to trade back into the first round, they would have a better access to the tight end of their choice, right? Dalton Kincaid of Utah, I don't know if they're going to be able to get up that high. He's probably going to go in the teens. Michael Mayer of Notre Dame, Darnell Washington of Georgia. Maybe you can get yourself into that offensive tackle, right tackle sweepstakes, right? DeJuan Jones, Ohio State, Darnell Wright, Tennessee. Those should be lower first-round guys. Price would not be a concern if you're in win-now mode, but having having the I guess the resources to move into that. I really don't think it's very realistic, but we bring it up as a possibility. Do you think the Dolphins are going to move into day one of the draft, that first round?
Yeah, I just don't see them with the pieces for a move into the first round this year. With only 4 picks in this draft and the top one being 51 overall, it's probably going to take some of your 2024 draft capital. And the Dolphins might be in this F them picks mode. And by F, of course, I mean forget.
Yeah.
We keep it PG on Dolphins deep dive. But they can hold on to their 2024 first for a move, maybe this upcoming season's trade deadline. We talked about it a little bit in the last segment. And similar to trading for Chubb last season. So kind of figure out where a hole remains if one comes up in training camp or early in the season once you start playing some games, or if there's a key injury that they need to replace someone at a certain position and go after a proven player when you're in this sort of window, as opposed to maybe you're taking a chance always with a draft pick, of course. So if they don't plan on drafting on late April, Thursday night again by this time next year, then that pick could easily be dangled around. But I don't see it for this year's draft. I don't see them making that much of a jump into the first round. Maybe lower or earlier in the second round if they really like a certain player, like a Gibbs that they figure is going to be off the board at a certain point, or Darnell Washington if they target a certain spot where they think that's the latest he'll go, or someone else they need to feel they jump up for, whoever's highest on their board that they really want. Maybe we see a slight move up into the second round that doesn't require as much, but maybe even try to you could see them trading down in the third, especially if they get a Gibbs with the second round pick. Then I would like to see them still address the offensive line and tight end before you get to that 6th and 7th. So maybe they could trade down with the third to add another early day 3 pick and kind of figure out the best way to draft those 2 positions. So there's some movement that could be made, but I don't see it being going into the first round this year.
Yeah, and you know what? You're brilliant, and one of our viewers, Jeffrey Corris, brilliant, because he said the same thing. He says, what about moving back in the draft, trade back at 51 and load up? We need competition. And Jeffrey is exactly right, because you could fill more of those spots when you're looking at 2nd and 3rd round, 4th round. That's prime territory for starting offensive linemen, or get somebody to develop at a position. These are still positions where you expect 1st, 2nd, and 3rd rounds. To me, you're drafting these guys as starters, as potential starters. You get into the 4th round, well, maybe if he's an offensive lineman, he's a potential starter, but these are kind of developmental guys, rotational guys. But 2nd and 3rd round, Jeffrey Corris he's exactly right. You could trade back. And look, here when you talk about moving up, we know they moved up in the 2nd round to get Liam Eichenberg, but trading back is brilliant because we know they need more talent. There's more talent there at different positions in 2nd and 3rd rounds. And we know that Chris Greer loves making draft day trades. So that's where you and Jeffrey, you both get bonus points on that. How realistic do you think it is, Furones, that they trade back?
Hey, it's a great idea, and you and I both would have put it in our mock drafts, but we both know that would require more work, because then we have to pick all the way until whatever pick down that the Dolphins go down to. So we weren't going to do more than 51 mock draft picks. That's just how we operate here.
I was off the board. I agree. Hey, and one thing about these mock drafts, I did not put trades into mine. You did put trades into yours, so that's another way that we differentiated and gave people different looks at our mock drafts. So,
you have a 2.0 coming out next week.
I do. And it is
you're going to have trades in that one, right?
I am going to have trades in that one. And
it seems like that number 3 pick, someone's going to try to get up there for a quarterback. We know something has to happen with Aaron Rodgers, we believe, before the draft. So I didn't go crazy with it, like come up with all these crazy scenarios, but sort of the ones that we kind of figure, the ones we know about. I mean, we know the Jets and Packers are going to trade for Aaron Rodgers. You figure it'll be before draft night. So I took that into account with one of the Jets' 2nd round picks. So.
Yeah, I think that the early ones are easier. Those mid rounds, the teams that make those are the ones from our standpoint that are really tough to project. One more thing on the Dolphins and the draft, and when we talk about moving, trading up, trading back, look, this team has a really good history of second round picks. So if they want to stay at 51, you've got a really good history. Guys in the last 10 years, guys such as Javon Holland and Robert Hunt and Xavier Howard, you have had a lot of success. Jarvis Landry is in that group of the last 10 years. You've had a lot of success with second round picks. And look, even a guy such as Liam Eichenberg, he's played a role for you. Now, he's not headed for the Pro Bowl, and he was a little shaky last year, but he's at worst, he's a rotational player. That's a decent pick. It's not like the guy is out of the league or anything like that. So, I would say that this second round pick is probably going to be a productive player. I'm not predicting Pro Bowl as a rookie, but I could almost guarantee, based on their recent draft history, and I don't know why they do so well in the second round, but I'm betting this is going to be a productive player.
Yeah, Chris Greer has a track record recently of some solid second-round picks. You mentioned Holland. Some picks with the offensive line, especially around these rounds, and then you could also include Austin Jackson as a first-rounder. Haven't gone as well, but they did get Laramie Tunsil in the first round, the year that he fell to them, and then that turned into a treasure trove of draft picks later on. So, Xavier Howard, of course, was a second-round pick as well. Liam Eichenberg, the only thing I'll say is that they did trade up, so it's not only the second-round pick, it's also what else did they give up in that trade? So you use both of those sort of is what you have to account for in that selection. So in that case, you kind of need to hit. It's not like
here, and this is on Chosen Anderson, the wide receiver, South Plantation. He's been troubled off the field, and really, to me, the big question here, if he can play. He feels a need, right? 6'3", can stretch the field, kind of a bigger bodied receiver, which they don't have, a physical guy. But can Dolphins culture keep him focused? The Dolphins have not really, in recent years, you brought up Damon Arnett, but they have not in recent years gone after guys who have had issues off the field. We've seen them go after a couple of first-round picks under Brian Flores, Robert Kimdichie, Taco Charlton, some guys who had problems living up to their draft status. But this is different, and this is something that it's going to test your organization in a different way. This is a guy that can help you, but can you keep his head right? And if you can, it's huge, right? This to me, it's low risk, high reward. So number one, Furones, what do you think of the acquisition and the role that he could play? And number two, what does Mike McDaniel have to do? Does he have to be in his ear? Is it Wes Welker? Is it Tyreek Hill? Is it what do you do with Robbie Chosen Anderson?
That's right. Yeah, it's different. Yeah, it's Chosen. And I like that Dolphins culture. So is that playing off of Heat culture? Now I haven't heard it anywhere except here now. But yeah, let's start it. There's a Dolphins culture now. I was going to use the same phrase. Low risk, high reward is what it seems to be with this acquisition. A guy with blazing speed, so he fits right into this offense in that regard. We know how dynamic and how explosive. They have playmakers just all over the field between Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and in the backfield, Raheem Mostert. So another guy with great speed and with greater size and length than your Hill, your Waddle, your Braxton Berrios, your other receivers. So could give to a bigger body pass catcher that he's kind of missing. And hey, maybe coming back home can get him back on track. Maybe he's slowly maturing at this point. Although I know those arrests in 2017, 2018, though they were a while back now at this point, those were in South Florida, so those were instances where he was back home. But you never know. Maybe Chosen is different from Robbie Anderson of the past. So maybe that's something that we see here as the Dolphins try to bring him in, and hopefully he gets right, and maybe just a change in environment after a couple times. I mean, we know he could be productive. His last year with the Jets, really a few of those years with the Jets, and that first year in Carolina, 2020, very productive seasons, was a 1,000-yard pass catcher that year. I've chosen him several times in fantasy football drafts, late in the draft, just thinking, hey, he could probably do some of that, what he did that first year in Carolina, 1,000-yard season, maybe be a bigger body touchdown target in the red zone. So maybe that could be a valued addition and low risk. And Mike McDaniel might have to deal with the personalities. Possibly, I mean, he has a history of some off the field, even on the field incidents when he got kicked out of a game. But and Mike McDaniel, I'll give him credit, although he didn't have too many of those instances, it seemed, his first year with a really good locker room that the Dolphins have. Sort of the one instance that I could think of was Preston Williams early on last year, training camp, maybe a little bit in OTAs and mini camp, but he wasn't happy with the reps he was getting in practices and how he was fitting into the new offense. And I think Mike McDaniel really handled that well. We know he is a player's coach, if you will, so he always sort of fits in with the guys and isn't sort of your disciplinarian like they had previously with Brian Flores, but it seemed like kind of that first time that he was tested in that regard by Preston Williams last year, he seemed to handle himself well. So I think he is prepared to lay the hammer down if he has to, but more so he's gonna treat him with love. He's gonna like any player that he has.
Yeah, and Mike McDaniel laying the hammer down. I don't know that we've seen, although we did see that video. And what game was that where he yelled at somebody, "Get the bleeping defense fixed" or "Get it fixed"?
At Boyer, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of early on. Was that the Baltimore game? Or it might have, because
it might have
they
been
were struggling in the first half of that one. It might,
but
one of those early games.
That's the only time I remember McDaniel laying the hammer down that we could see, and that was captured on camera. But look, if you're a head coach, I'm sure you're able to do it. Hey, question from our chat, which we always appreciate getting the chat questions. This is from Raphael Courtwright. Will the Dolphins play 4 wide receiver sets with the addition of Chosen Anderson? I would have to think so, because it opens that possibility, and we'll see again. The McDaniel needs to improve as a play caller, and I fully think that he will. He was a rookie last year. A lot of players and coaches have issues their rookie year. I would like to see what new things he throws in, because as a defense sees you throughout the season and throughout the years, they learn trends and tendencies, and you got to kind of keep things fresh, not make wholesale changes, not make big philosophical changes, but little tweaks. And the 4 wide receiver set, especially depending on what you do at tight end, that could be an option. And so I think all things are on the table when you have Mike McDaniel, such a creative offensive mind, and you give him more skilled, different types of skill sets to work with. So I 100% think that that's a possibility with Chosen Anderson.
Sure, it can be. Maybe a lot of third downs. We know how much 12 personnel and 21 personnel that Mike McDaniel does like to run, because he does incorporate the fullback. So you have Alec Ingold on this roster, so you're going to have 2 backs when you have him in the game. And, last year when he had Smythe and Gesicki, then we did see 2 tight end sets. So depends, right? Like you said, in the draft, if they add another tight end that needs to get a lot of reps, Durham Smythe is obviously a plan in the future plans of this organization. They gave him an extension, and you just brought in Eric Saubert as well. Maybe Tanner Connor can come along, but you do have tight ends that you could combine in some 2 tight end sets as well. So that kind of diminishes your opportunities for how often you can go out in 4 wide sets, but sure, I mean, you want to have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on the field as much as possible. And then you brought Braxton Berrios in to contribute, and he could really do well in the slot in this offense and his familiarity with a similar system. And then if Chosen Anderson ends up providing you something that you see that really works well in this offense, then get him on the field. And that's quite a third down combination if you have those guys in there with one of the running backs or one of the tight ends.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, Furones, going back to Chosen Anderson, and some of the issues that he's had. One was at a concert in Miami. One was a traffic stop, Davie maybe, or something like that. But those things. I am, and this is a total football guy, right? Those things, I'm more worried about him getting kicked out of the game after arguing with his wide receivers coach in Carolina. And I'm not trying to be insensitive, but this is a football show, and so I'm talking about keeping this guy focused on the field. The off the field stuff. Look, we've seen guys do knucklehead things and correct themselves, right? When you're arguing with a receiver coach, you wonder about your respect for authority or other things like that. So that, I'm wondering if that's a bigger issue. I mean, for me, this sounds bad, but for me, just speaking in a football sense, not a Chosen Anderson the person, and a Chosen Anderson the wide receiver for the Dolphins. You're arguing with a coach and you get kicked out of the game. That's something that I think the Dolphins are going to have to worry more about than the other stuff. Do you have, again, you can make me sound like an idiot if you want to hear from us.
No, that's a valid point, man. And here's another thing. We haven't seen Chosen Anderson or Robbie Anderson on any good teams. So what, 4 years with the Jets, those years in Carolina. He hasn't been on any winning team, any
Arizona,
above 500 team. Yeah, and then half of Arizona last year. All these teams have been below 500. So generally, teams with maybe some internal turmoil that's going on within the organization, success not there on the field. Maybe if he's into a situation where if the Dolphins are winning this year and things are coming together, he's not going to disrupt going things, something that is working. So even if he's not getting the ball as much as he would like, maybe he understands sort of the totality, and especially now with this older age of his, and being on his hometown team, representing for 954, where he's from, the Broward County and South Florida, and trying to put on a winning product for the hometown Dolphins. Then even if things aren't going 100% your way, where you're not getting the balls you want or the snaps you want, the routes you want to be running in certain formations, whatever the arguments were with his wide receivers coach, maybe the motivation in itself comes, I don't want to disrupt a winning culture that we are building here if this Dolphins team in 2023 really starts coming along.
Yeah, and here's another part of that, Furones. All of this stuff that we're talking about with Chosen Anderson, it really kind of started yesterday when the Dolphins reported, right? Yesterday was the day that they reported, and the team is going to be together doing things by position and by unit, conditioning and things like that. And this is where you get to know people. And so the process that we're talking about with Chosen, bless you, being in being in an environment where guys want to win. You see Tyreek working hard, and you see Teron working hard, and Jalen Waddle and Tua, and that's also a factor that Dolphins culture, baby, Dolphins culture. We'll see. It's a hard-working team, and so we will see if that influences him. But I think that this is one of the things that the Dolphins are relying on. Wouldn't you think that?
Yeah, and one of the reasons why no one says Dolphins culture is because, for the past 2 decades, they've mostly been a losing team now. They have a winning record the past 3 years, going on one playoff appearance, now trying to go deeper into the playoffs. So, hey, no one was saying heat culture back in the early days of the franchise, late 80s, early 90s,
right.
Making their first playoff appearance in 92 with Glenn Rice and Steve Smith, the Ronnie Cycli days. It comes later on when Pat Riley has really established something for years, and they're winning, and they get a title in 06 and 12 and 13, go back-to-back, made 4 finals in a row, and then sort of even as rosters change and players come in and out, then there is something established that when you come into this organization, this is the way you behave yourself and behave as a professional. So that's something that can in part be established by winning. So that's a culture that can be built upon going forward if the Dolphins continue on this track and are able to then bringing guys that maybe have some troubled past but are ready to move on from that and just focus on football and winning and join a winning organization if the Dolphins are able to become that in these next upcoming years.
Yeah, and look, with that culture, that moniker, that label, or that tag, whatever you want to call it, you have to have guys in the locker room who carry that out. And with the Heat, what you're talking about, Alonzo Mourning was a guy who did that. Keith Askins was a guy who did that. Udonis Haslem, a guy who does that. And so that's why with the Dolphins, I'm thinking that it starts now with Chosen Anderson. Now that they're reporting that, yes, guys like Tyreek and Teron and Jalen and Tua and all of these guys kind of, you don't have to say anything to Chosen. He learns by example. He learns by looking around that, kind of the Patriot way, right? That, oh, okay, this is how they do it. I'm going to fall in line. So that's what I think happens. Hey, one more question here on Chosen from our chat. This is from Troy Jesse. And I'll throw this to you. It's a question about ego, really. Can Chosen Anderson accept being the third option in the passing game? You alluded to this earlier. Do you think he can accept that?
He better accept that. He better at least accept that he's going to be the third option. You're playing with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I don't think you're coming in thinking that you're going to supplant one of them as a number one or number two. So, yeah, at the very least, you're coming in understanding you are the third wide receiver at best. So, yes, I think most wide receivers in the NFL, if they were to join the Dolphins roster as currently constructed, you have to understand you are the third wide. You are competing to be the third wide receiver if you can get there.
Yeah, and look, and I think it would be easy for the Dolphins to explain to him and show him you're going to have a good role. You're going to have a defined role. It's not like, well, we'll bring him in and blah, blah, blah. I think McDaniel could clearly point out, look, this is what we want from you. This is where you're going to be playing, right? It's not like you're coming into training camp to try to earn the number one or number two receiver spot. Like you said, I mean, he knows what he's coming into. I think it's a pretty clear track. So if he can't accept that, then there's going to be problems here. But I think he ought to be able to accept that.
Yeah, and there's a good locker room in place. A lot of culture guys. So you said like with the Heat, it had to start with having Alonzo Mourning in place, and then he sort of set the tone for that. Then for years to come, and Udonis Haslem having him for 20 years, and him paired with Dwayne Wade, of course. So you could bring different guys in and out, and then they could just sort of assimilate. And if they don't, then you move on from them, and you find your next guy, someone who will. But it makes it easier to get when you have guys like a Teron Armstead in this locker room, like a Jalen Phillips. Now you're bringing in a Jalen Ramsey. Tyreek Hill, he messes around a lot, but I mean he's serious about his craft. Obviously, you don't get to be that good of an NFL player if you're not dead serious about what you do on the field, and then Tua becoming that. He's every year he takes greater steps in becoming a leader. So as a quarterback now going into year 4, every year just taking another stride in that regard as a leader. A lot of other guys I'm sure you can name on this team. So there are culture guys sort of in place. And just an overall, mostly great locker room. We're in there often talking to guys, and just a lot of just good dudes that are in this Dolphins locker room, honestly.
Yeah, no, listen, this was honestly one of the best locker rooms that I've covered in more than 20 years of pro sports. And because they were just good guys. And when I say that, I'm not, trying to overstep bounds. I mean, but make big decisions on, he pays his taxes and he doesn't do this or
tax day.
Right, exactly. But yeah, these are guys who they're upbeat, they're positive, they're hardworking. And look, even Tyreek, we all know that Tyreek loves to have a good time. We love joking around with Tyreek. But you talk to players and coaches, and that dude works. He works his butt off. You've heard them talk about how competitive he is, that like whatever, playing ping pong or running routes or running sprint, like he's competing. And that's a culture guy. That's what you want your team to be. And maybe that rubs off on Chosen Anderson. But yeah, that's like the Dolphin culture that they're trying to build, right?
Right. And hey, yesterday, Monday, April 17th, was the first day of the Dolphins offseason workout program. Now we're not there on site to cover the daily workouts that are going on. We will be once they get to the organized team activities, OTAs phase for some select practices, the mandatory mini camp. Right now, these are voluntary team drills. But you're talking about Tyreek Hill, and we're not there, but the Dolphins did release some pictures of guys coming in, some video on social media, guys excited to get to work. Who's there? Hey, the best players on your team, Tyreek Hill. We saw Jalen Ramsey in a picture. Hey, they're out there. So that's what you talk about. They take their craft seriously. They're there on day one. It's voluntary. Xavier Howard seen there, and we know that some of the years in the past when he was dealing with some of the contract issues, he wasn't always there for voluntary stuff. So you see him there on day one, and I'm sure motivated as well, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, that he doesn't want to be then the weak spot on the other side if teams are going away from Ramsey after he had a little bit of a rough 2022 campaign and dealing with those groin injuries. And it seems like he's taking his offseason very seriously to have a bounce-back season and get back to being that ball hawk that we have known Xavier Howard to be with the Dolphins over 4 Pro Bowls since that 2016 second-round selection. So you talk about that locker room, and then you see it on day one of off-season workouts and the guys that are showing up.
Yeah, that really was absolutely one of my favorite locker rooms. You're just bringing in Jeff Wilson. You're bringing in guys mid-season who play hard and have a smile on their face. I don't know if it means they're going to go to the Super Bowl this year, but it is truly a good locker room, and I say that without trying to suck up or earn points from anybody. Good locker room. Furones, what the bonus here? So we talked about the Jalen Hurts.
Furones bonus.
I know. There is. I know.
It's a new segment. We just started at 12:41 today.
I know. That's bad. We always talk about trying to get out of here in 30 or 45 minutes, and here comes Perk bringing up a stupid bonus question. But here it is. So we did talk about Jalen Hurts and his contract, and we all know what's happening with quarterbacks who have success. Does that put out an alarm? Does that put out that extra win now mode notice to either you, or should it for Chris Grier?
Yeah, that's kind of why we look at it. It's one of the reasons why we look at this window. Obviously, a lot of these bigger contracts, and they're going to become more burdensome as the years go by. And then there will be some decisions that have to be made by Chris Grier, by Assistant GM Marvin Allen, VP Brandon Shore. And hey, the Bills GM, he was talking when the Bills just were eliminated by the Bengals. And he was asked about the roster construction, and now the Bengals sort of surpassing them. They went to 1 Super Bowl, got to the AFC Championship game, lost a tight game to the Chiefs last year. The Bills, after getting to an AFC Championship game, have gone out a round earlier these past 2 years. And hey, yeah, it does become a little bit more difficult when you have to pay the quarterback the big money. Now, the Chiefs are an example of a franchise that has been able to do it. Patrick Mahomes, he got deservedly what he received, and they had to make some cuts. You got to make the smart decisions then at that point. So for them, it was moving on from Tyreek Hill. They were able to replenish at wide receiver, and Mahomes was just brilliant in his own right, even without Tyreek, but still having Travis Kelce to be able to perform at the level he did. So, the Dolphins are looking at right now, Jalen Hurts would make a little bit more than Tua Tagovailoa on his next extension. Now, the numbers change every year. Every year it's going to go higher. We're not – it's inflation across the NFL. It's not like the NFL is going to underperform and start having to cut back on salaries. It's only going to keep going up. So right now the Dolphins have Tua on this 4th season at around $10 million, I think 9 or so, to 9, 10, or 11. I can't remember now. But then that $22 million figure for the 5th-year option, so you have that the next 2 seasons, and then it's going to get interesting. You could either franchise tag them if you want to still kind of take it year by year. You're not certain you want to go the extension route, but yeah, Daniel Jones just got $40 million average annual value. So you're looking at something upwards of that. You're going to go into the 40s for sure, keeping Tua long term. And then that is when it does become more difficult to construct the holistic roster around him, where you're able to go bringing a Tyreek Hill, a Teron Armstead in the same offseason, bringing a Jalen Ramsey the next offseason, afford a Bradley Chubb with that trade. So then that's where roster decisions become a little bit more strenuous, and then you have to make these decisions, and you better hit on who you are paying at that point.
Yeah, and look, the other thing that happens after you have some success, other teams come in and pick apart your players and your coaching staff, right? Because they see that these are good players and coaches. So it's tough. I mean, the 2-year win now window, I'm not saying that everything is over after the 2024 season, but this current core, it'll probably be very tough to keep them together.
This is where you're able to keep everyone there.
Right.
And then maybe even still then go make another big splash move with using your 2024 first-round pick if you do at the trade deadline. And especially you'll have that post-June 1 money from the Byron Jones cut. So, but then after that, it's only going to become harder to keep the thing together.
Right. All right, Furones, 45 minutes, baby. We did it. Even with Perk's little bonus at the end, we did it. So, all right, Dolphins fans, we're just trying to make you happy here. We don't want to take up your whole day, but we always appreciate you guys sending in your questions. We appreciate the viewing. That's your boy Furones. I'm your boy Perk. We will see you next Tuesday. Oh, by the way, Sentinel.com tomorrow will have full coverage of the Dolphins pre-draft press conference. We'll hear from Chris Greer and assistant GM Marvin Allen. We'll hear from Xavier Howard. We'll hear from Tua. So you want to definitely be tuned in to SunSentinel.com tomorrow for our coverage, and then throughout the week for everything we've got. Yep.
Read up on all our pre-draft coverage that we've had extensively over the past 2 weeks. Perk's mock draft, my mock draft, all our positional breakdowns from the draft and the current Dolphins roster. A lot of good stuff.
There we go, baby. There we go. We will see you guys next Tuesday at noon, SunSentinel.com.